Dad, please help me, I've been in an accident. The voice on the phone was his son's, with that familiar stutter when stressed. John immediately transferred $7,000 for his son's medical bills, before discovering his real son was asleep at college, unharmed. The voice belonged to no one, manufactured by AI, using samples from his son's social media videos. The human brain has evolved over millions of years to recognize voices as proof of identity. Yet this evolutionary advantage has been dismantled by deepfake technology. This wasn't a desperate family call. It was our glimpse into a reality where our most trusted perceptions become weapons. What happens when we can no longer trust our own senses? That's the question at the heart of today's digital horror story. The evolution of trust, how our brains became weapons against us. For millions of years, our brains evolved one crucial survival mechanism, the ability to recognize faces and voices of our tribe. This adaptation was essential for survival. Our ancestors needed to instantly distinguish friend from foe, family from stranger. The neural pathways, dedicated to facial and voice recognition, became so sophisticated that most of us can identify a loved one's voice in a crowded room, or recognize a familiar face in a sea of strangers, almost instantaneously. But what happens when the most fundamental human sense, recognition, becomes our greatest vulnerability? In less than 2 years, deepfake technology has systematically dismantled this evolutionary advantage. In our modern digital world, these same instincts have become vulnerabilities exploited by invisible predators. Our brains, designed to trust what they see and hear, haven't had time to adapt to this new reality, where seeing and hearing are no longer reliable proofs of identity. This evolutionary lag explains why 97% of organizations now struggle with identity verification, despite implementing sophisticated security systems. The problem isn't with the technology, it's with us. Our neurological trust mechanisms, hardwired over millennia, create psychological blind spots that criminals exploit with precision. Imagine, for a moment, what happens when you receive a call from someone sounding exactly like your daughter, claiming she's been in an accident. Your brain activity fundamentally shifts. The emotional centers immediately activate, while analytical regions experience significant suppression. This automatic neurological response evolved to protect our loved ones. Dr. Eliza Thornton, a neurobiologist at Cambridge University, offers critical insight into this phenomenon. When we hear a loved one in distress, the amygdala floods the brain with stress hormones within milliseconds. This creates an immediate action imperative that bypasses normal verification processes. The prefrontal cortex becomes temporarily subordinated to emotional processing, and in evolutionary terms, this makes perfect sense. But what is particularly alarming is our collective overconfidence in detecting deepfake manipulations. Studies show people believe they can identify deepfakes when they actually cannot. In controlled experiments, participants regularly mistake deepfake videos for authentic ones, yet maintain confidence in their discernment abilities. This overconfidence creates a devastating vulnerability. The resulting confusion is widespread. In a recent survey, 63% of American adults reported that deepfakes generate a great deal of confusion about basic facts and identity. This isn't just a technical problem, it's an epistemological crisis. One that undermines the very foundation of how we establish trust. And the financial impact has reached staggering proportions. Current fraud losses, attributed to these technologies, have surpassed $10 billion annually, with projections to quadruple to $40 billion by 2027. The average cost of a single data breach now stands at $4.45 million. An all-time high reached this year. The invisible arsenal. 3 weapons that make you complicit in your own victimization. The voice recognition system, your brain perfected over millions of years, now betrays you in ways your ancestors could never have imagined. In just 30 seconds, the length of a social media video you casually posted, someone can create a replica of your voice that can fool your loved ones, and even sophisticated biometric systems designed to protect your most valuable assets. The most effective predators don't look like threats, they look exactly like those you trust most in the world. But since 2023, an invisible arsenal of 3 distinct weapons has emerged in the digital shadows. Each precisely calibrated to exploit specific vulnerabilities in human perception. The first weapon is voice cloning technology, which has reached a chilling level of sophistication. Those 30 seconds of audio I mentioned become a vocal fingerprint so accurate, it passes through advanced biometric verification systems. Your voice, the signature sound family members instinctively trust, transforms into a skeleton key, unlocking every door in your life. As an example, consider what happened in Hong Kong last year. A finance worker received what appeared to be a legitimate video conference invitation. The faces looked right, voices sounded authentic, and the conversation felt natural. Every person on that call was an AI-generated phantom. The result, $25 million, vanished into accounts that disappeared without a trace. This wasn't a technological failure, but a masterful exploitation of trust. And while voice technology attacks what we hear, the second weapon undermines what we see. Video impersonation has evolved beyond simple face swapping into hyper-realistic representations that capture the essence of human behavior. Like a digital puppeteer, these algorithms generate authentic eye movements, micro-expressions, and speech patterns indistinguishable from reality. What makes this particularly dangerous is how they simulate natural human imperfections. Those slight pauses between thoughts, occasional stutters, the subtle furrow of concentration, all replicated with unsettling precision. But perhaps most disturbing is the third weapon, synthetic identity creation. Unlike traditional identity theft, that steals existing information, this approach blends real and fabricated data to create entirely new personas that easily pass verification checks. These aren't stolen identities, but believable entities that have never existed. This technique has become one of the fastest-growing fraud categories, showing a 31% increase in incidents as criminals refine their methods. Together, these three mechanisms form a coordinated attack vector, transforming the cybercrime landscape. The financial sector has been hit hardest, with 42.5% of all fraud now being AI-driven, and a 2,137% rise in deepfake fraud attempts since these technologies became widely accessible. However, the numbers tell only part of the story. Behind each statistic is someone who acted reasonably, based on what they saw and heard. Someone who used the same perceptual tools that served humanity reliably for our entire existence only to discover those tools have been weaponized against them. The architecture of panic. Engineering scenarios that bypass rational thought. These victims weren't simply duped because they were careless or naive, they were systematically manipulated, through scenarios, meticulously engineered, to short-circuit rational thought. When was the last time you received an urgent message from someone you love, and paused to verify their identity before responding? This instinctive trust in familiar voices becomes a liability when weaponized by those who understand exactly how your mind processes fear. The psychological architecture behind deepfake scams isn't random. It's a calculated exploitation of how our brains function under pressure. Studies have consistently shown that when placed under stress or time constraints, our capacity for critical analysis dramatically diminishes. The architects of these attacks have essentially mapped the neural pathways that abandon logical thinking when confronted with specific emotional triggers. Fear hijacks the brain. When confronted with the loved one in danger scenario, the brain's fear center, the amygdala, overrides the rational prefrontal cortex. This neurological response creates what psychologists term an amygdala hijack, rendering even security-trained individuals vulnerable to manipulation. The manufactured emergency exploits our psychological wiring that prioritizes response speed over verification when we believe someone we care about needs immediate help. In practice, this means victims transfer funds without performing basic verification steps they would normally take. "I heard my daughter crying," recounts Maria, a victim of such a scam. "She told me she was in the hospital after a car accident." The voice was hers. Every inflection, every subtle speech pattern. When someone claiming to be her doctor took over the call explaining she needed immediate surgery. "I didn't hesitate. I sent $8,000 to an account I'd never seen before. It wasn't until I called my daughter's cell phone afterward that I realized she was fine, sitting in class the entire time." The authority figure under pressure scenario operates through similar psychological mechanisms. Employees receive communications from apparent senior executives demanding urgent action. The result of this engineered panic is swift compliance, rather than authentication, particularly when combined with the perceived consequences of failing to respond to leadership. Research confirms these artificial deadlines significantly increase compliance rates. However, perhaps most concerning is the identity verification paradox. Organizations implement security procedures that inadvertently create new vulnerabilities. When a deepfake scammer calls, claiming to be from your bank's security team, about a suspicious transaction, they initiate a verification process themselves, asking for information that enables the fraud. Here the very mechanisms designed to protect become pathways for exploitation. The effectiveness of these attacks lies in their psychological precision. They transform victims into willing participants through a calculated combination of emotional manipulation, time pressure, and contextual plausibility. The targeted individual isn't questioning authenticity, they're instead focused entirely on resolving the perceived crisis. Scammers have reverse-engineered human decision-making under duress, creating scenarios that trigger predictable behavioral patterns. In conclusion, what's most chilling about our deepfake reality isn't just the financial toll, though $40 billion in projected fraud losses by 2027 is staggering. It's the fundamental dissolution of trust itself. When your senses can no longer be trusted, the psychological aftermath creates a persistent trauma that transcends monetary damage. Advanced biometric systems and AI detection represent just one piece of the defense puzzle, as traditional verification becomes increasingly ineffective. This demands not just technical countermeasures, but a complete recalibration of digital trust. Legal frameworks are developing, but our most powerful defense remains awareness. Stay informed, ask questions, and never assume what you see or hear is genuine. The deepfake predator thrives on ignorance. In this new landscape, your skepticism is your protection. After all, your voice belongs to them now.